All right, welcome back to the F3 Northeast Way Q Source podcast. I'm your host, Blake Anderson, Money Pit, and I'm thrilled to have back on the podcast for session number 2, Jim Thompson Gilmore. Gilmore, thanks for being willing to come back on the podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. I love getting on here and rapping with you about this. It's been so great to listen to all the different things, but it's also quite a treat to be on here as well. So,
Well, I really appreciate your wisdom. You know, you're a leader's leader and have so much to bring to this topic. And I mean, we all know that just your presence in our F3 community, but we also know that because of your presence in our local community and the way you have been a leader in the greater Wake Forest community for a while. And the chapter we're in right now, it's Q3.3, it's trust. And I know enough about Gilmore. One, we were in a jingle mingle together, so we
right,
really got to
right.
know each other. We shared our stories. He shared with me some of his professional journey, and I know that this is a topic that he can shed so much light in. He's walked in team building, he's walked in leadership, understands intimately the importance of trust. So I just thought, what a great person to get on, share some wisdom and some insight with us. So thanks for being willing to do that.
Absolutely, man. So excited.
So what I love about this part of the book, so we're in Q3, third quadrant. It's about lead right. So we have get right, live right, now lead right. And the first
Right,
portion of lead right is about team building, right? And
right.
so we have shared leadership, just kind of this idea that if you're, I like this phrase: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right?
Love it.
Powerful teams bring people onto the leadership team and they share the load. And then we went into mutual competence, really talking about you need to build your team with competent people, and you need to build your team with people who have competencies that you don't, as you round it out with a skill set. And now we come into trust.
Absolutely.
And I think we all know that trust is such an important part in human relationship, but it's such an important part of leadership. So I just love to get your first take on trust, and then we can kind of dig into some of the points that Dred makes that I know that you and I both agree with.
Sure, sure. So, the thing about trust in an organization obviously is paramount to moving an organization forward. I mean, it's one thing to have a mission and vision, but if the members of the team don't trust each other to, have each other's back, to know that, that we're going to work together even when things don't go well, that there's those opportunities where, you learn so much from that. One of my really dear friends of mine who's a professional speaker had actually mentioned to me when we were talking about, rebuilding trust in our organization, not just internally, but externally in our community. He asked me the question, so Jim, do you know where the word actual trust comes from? And to be honest, I didn't. I mean, I knew what it felt like to trust somebody, but he said that the word trust is really made up of both warmth and and competency. So in
Mm-hmm.
other words, in order to be a leader who is trusted, you have to first be warm, compassionate, but you also have to be competent in what is it you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some other pieces around that too. I mean, I was actually reading a little bit further into that, this whole idea of the four C's of trust when you think about a leader. And there's also around consistency and communication. Like, those are other two components that when you look at a trusted leader, they have all those pieces. They're competent, they're consistent, they're caring, and they communicate effectively. So all those components really boil down to being a very trusted leader.
Yeah, I totally agree. It kind of reminds me of the conversation that Sharkbait and I had when we were launching this chapter, and we'll use your language. We've all had plenty of people we've worked with who were either probably compassionate or they were competent, but
Right.
it really takes both to fully trust someone. I mean, you so want to have compassionate people on your team,
Absolutely.
but if they're not competent,
Right.
you're not
Right.
really ready to kind of be vulnerable and give them any responsibility in what you're doing. And at the same time, someone who's competent, who has zero compassion, like there's no desire to want to work with them. Like it
No.
really takes those components to balance that out.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, when I have my staff, I mean, they have to feel like number one, that I've got their back. And number two, that I have the ability to
Yeah,
protect them if I need to, so it's
right.
that having that ability to not only trust the fact that, I trust that I care about you, but trust that I'm also competent enough to do my job and will take care of that.
Yeah, I love how you kind of touched on some the first point that Dred's making, which is it starts with us. I mean, it's the
Absolutely.
methodology, first principles thinking of the whole book, right? You get right
Absolutely.
first, you look yourself
Right.
in the mirror, right? And so first you've got to get right, you've got to live right before you're effectively able to lead right. And that's really what you're saying, that the people around you, they're watching you, right?
Hmm.
Before they extend that trust, they want to see you eat your own cooking, right?
Right. Exactly. Do you walk the walk? Because again, it's not, one of my very first uh, presidents that I ever worked for as an executive was with the North Carolina Association of Realtors, and he was one of these just like just great mentor. But I vividly remember one morning walking or driving into the office, and I got there early that particular day. And he was always a man that wore a suit and tie, just looked dressed to the nines always. He just believed in that professional mentality. But he didn't see that I was in the parking lot and watching, but there was some trash in the parking lot, and I saw him go over and pick it up and walked into the office. I'm like, here's a guy who's the head of the North Carolina Association of Realtors
Right.
cleaning up trash in the parking lot. But it's not about what leaders do when you see them. It's what about leaders do when you're not people are not watching. And
Yeah.
to your point, that consistency in leaders is what people want to see, and that's where that trust gets truly earned is when they can see that you're consistently and it's consistent in all the actions that you do.
I heard a great interview with a lady who was Chick-fil-A. And she said she learned from Dan Cathy, so Truett Cathy's son, who's the CEO and
Hmm.
runs Chick-fil-A. Even still today, when he visits every store, he finds a piece of trash in the parking lot. And it became thing. He was trained when he was a little boy. When they got
Right.
out of the stores, go find the trash and pick it up. And so now, even to this day,
Right.
he runs the whole organization. Every time he stops at a store, he finds trash and picks it up. And
Right.
so she just said that as a way that how he had easily earned their trust because he walked it, right?
Right.
Anything that he had
Right.
asked them to do that was something that he lived with. Um, so,
Absolutely.
so the point number two that Dread makes is after it starts with you that, you won't really know whether you have trust with someone until it's tested. And that's not the not so fun part, but isn't that
Right.
true? And I know that having led many teams, you can kind of test to what that testing is like and how to lead to understanding that you need to see that test and know whether you can trust someone.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think, again, going back to that competency component to a trusted leader, there's been ample times where, a situation has gone awry in a team that I've worked on. I mean, we had something that happened just recently with Meat in the Street. And, when the staff see that I have their back and I'm willing to go to bat for them and that exudes trust. I mean, the very first action I did when I got to the chamber, I realized there was some really odd situations in the way the office was structured in terms of just the physical layout. And, instead of walking in with a preconceived notion of, well, this is how it's got to be, I listened to them as a team and said, what do you want? What would make most sense to you in your working environment? And then was willing to just sit there and listen and going back to that communication. You hear the phrase, there's a reason why you're given two ears and one mouth, so you
Mm-hmm.
can listen twice as much as you talk. Sometimes if you're just willing to just listen to your staff and know that, listen, I'm gonna listen to what you say, and then not only am I gonna listen to you, but I'm gonna react and do something. I'm not just gonna, but we completely rearranged the office. I don't even have what's considered the president's office now because it was like, oh, it make more sense for two staff people to share this massive office than for them to be sitting in a closet, basically. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
but that that
that
just
that
that trust was just immediately built, and that is that that it's not about me, it's about
Yeah.
us.
That listening really showed compassion and competence at the same time. I mean, we think about listening, oh, it's compassionate to hear, but really the most competent leaders are the ones that are the best listeners and they're getting the
Right,
feedback of the other people.
right.
So, you had shared something with me privately that you said you'd be willing to talk a little bit on the podcast. So, you're now the new president of the Wake Forest Chamber of Commerce, and you stepped into a situation where the previous leader had lost trust
Hmm.
and the organization was, I don't know how you would say, but trust was eroded for sure. And so
Oh,
you're
100%.
stepping into a tenuous environment where there's zero trust there. and it sounded like a challenge that you were up for. And I'd love to hear one, where it was and what you did to rebuild the trust of that team to get them back fully functioning again.
Sure, sure. Well, I think, to me, it all boils down to just transparency and accountability. I mean, that's one of the things that, when I think about a well-oiled team and a well-oiled machine, it's a group that's, willing to operate on all, is working on all cylinders, is accountable for each other. When you think about us in F3,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I think our workouts are so successful and our groups are so successful is there is no weak link. I mean, even when there's a supposed looks like there might be a weak link, there's somebody there to pick that link up
Yeah.
and make sure that no, we all succeed together, no matter what it looks like, even if it's at a seesaw, one of these like crazy
Mm-hmm.
events that we do. Um, but I think, knowing that, I was willing to be transparent and, show the financials to the staff that they had never even seen before. I mean, it's like, can you imagine running a budget for a property or one of your renovations, knowing that you've never even seen a budget for it and you're just a staff person trying to figure out, well, I guess I'll just do the best I can based on the knowledge, the limited knowledge I do, so I think consistently showing that transparency that, like one of my very first presidents I ever worked for when I was an executive director, he used to always make the comment that the only time I like surprises are on birthdays.
Yes.
The other time, if you know
Yeah.
about something
Yeah.
and I
So,
find out you knew about it before I did, then we're going to have a problem. So, I try to maintain that level of just transparency and openness and, knowing that, willing to share all this information and be vulnerable, knowing that, I realize we were in a, we had a bad situation here, but and I use this analogy all the time. I know this, it drives the staff crazy, but, I have this phrase that I use that there's a reason why the windshield is 65% larger than the rearview mirror is because you should spend more time looking forwards than backwards, and so when you're running an organization, it's like, look, we have to be mission driven. Yes, we can look back a little bit, but for the
yeah.
most part we need to be mission driven and looking where we're going and not so much spending time looking in the rearview mirror at where we've been.
Yeah, definitely. Previous to coming attractions on what Gilmore just said, as we'll start to talk more about the importance of vision as one of the four skills of leadership. But it sounds like from what you told me about that team that you've seen a real change of heart and a turnaround, and they're feeling like things are possible again. And I know I bring a lot of leadership chops to the table, but my guess is just reestablishing some trust, starting to give people some confidence again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's I use this analogy a lot in the staff. If you've ever played on a soccer team and if you watch them when they're doing set pieces and usually somebody's one or two different people are set to take a corner kick, but at the end of the day, everybody's going to goal. Like it doesn't matter who
Mm-hmm.
scores. Like everybody is trying to get ahead on the ball and we will all celebrate no matter who does it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think for the first time, I feel like everybody here is all going to goal knowing that it
Mm,
doesn't matter who's the one who gets the
right.
head on the ball. It's just and it doesn't matter who's taking the corner kick. Like at the end of the day, we're going to all celebrate when that ball goes in the back of the net. You know,
Yeah, I just made me think. I mean, how I could see that trust is eroded when you don't know whether you get to share in that victory, whether it's going to be someone is going to be manipulating you so that they go to the goal and you have to stand around and watch,
right,
and is my effort really going to be rewarded, and is that person trustworthy in that way? So,
right, absolutely,
um,
absolutely.
hmm. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. So the last point that I want to just touch on before we wrap up this episode, Dred talks about trust is often built through shared pain.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
absolutely,
it's not a fun thing to want to have to embrace. And we as leaders, oftentimes we're trying to keep our teams out of the pain zone. But
right,
any of
right.
us who've led teams effectively over time realize that when those pop up, that can actually be some of the fertilizer for the relationship. And the best thing that can happen in a relationship sometimes is that struggle and pain that we've got to
Mhm.
endure through together.
No, absolutely. Well, Blake, it's funny you said that because, even I've only been on the staff here now for about 4 months. One of the things that I'm learning really quickly is that when things are going really well, we're literally, like a oil machine. I mean, we operate so effectively, but one of the things I've been noticing because we're still kind of learning each other and getting to know each other, we're learning that when conflicts arising here or there that we're not used to working with each other in
Mhm.
in a conflict situation. So that kind of pain of going through that struggle of that first time of, sometimes you learn the best out of a person of when you argue for the first time and how
Mhm.
you argue with each other. And disagreements are good. Like, it's good to have disagreements with each other, but it's how you manage that conversation. But we're having to start realize that, that there's some, um, in addition to, there's obviously when trust is in a good position, I think, conflicts can test that trust a little bit because they're not sure maybe
Yes.
what your intentions are. They felt
Yes.
like they did when things were good, but now it's like, hmm. So, having those situations where you can have those crucial conversations
Yeah.
around difficult things, knowing that, the ultimate, what is the true motive of why you're having this conversation? It's not about me and being first or being right. It's about us coming with a mutual solution at the end of the day.
Agreed. And I think we all know we can look back on those conflicts. And if you ever have gotten to the other side
Yes.
and you've found a result or you've reached your goal on the other side of that conflict and you got there with the other person rather than giving up or destroying each other, I can almost guarantee you are closer on the other end than you were before you even had the conflict. There's
Oh,
something that it
absolutely.
does that really brings people together and builds that trust in a way you almost can't do in another way.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And I loved how in the last podcast I know you were flying solo and
Mm-hmm.
reading, talking about Patrick
Yeah,
Lencioni's The Working
right.
Genius. We actually do that
Mm-hmm.
internally. We've had all of our team members, and we actually have a staff member that's going to be joining us full time, actually starting Friday. And that's one of the things that we're going to do together is we're going to talk about each of our Working Genius styles.
Mm-hmm.
And even before that, we're going to do a common like a exercise where we're going to all as a group for the first time we'll have four full-time staff members. So we're going to all sit down as a group and define, what are our core values in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how we work together internally, but then also what are our core values when it comes to serving our external customers and sort
Mm.
of based on those core values. Now let's look at our work in genius models and figure out we know we work really well together when things are great, but when
Yeah.
things aren't going well, how are we managing that? Because your working genius style and my working genius style may conflict each other. So how do we like work through that in a way that's positive?
Yeah, agreed. And I think the benefit of those type of personality tests, and as I said, I'm a huge proponent of that one, is when you know about where someone's genius is and what frustrates them, when you get into a heat of conflict, you can kind of see
Right.
the lens in which they're viewing the conflict. And you realize
Absolutely.
sometimes maybe it's just the fact that they're out of position here. They're being asked to do something that frustrates them, that's kind of providing that conflict, and you can kind of help each other in that way.
Right, right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
but
we'll
conflict's good though. Like
conflict is well.
we almost want to try to shy away from it sometimes, but in the reality, those are those learning moments that like you said, like there is nothing better than coming on the other side of a conflict that you've resolved together with a group or an individual staff member, whatever that case is. And when you're on that other side and you can sit back and go, wow, that was helpful. You
Yeah, it
know?
really was. I mean, it's a plug for another Lencioni book. If you're creating a list for your leadership library, another one he has called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And one of the five
Very good one.
dysfunctions is the conflict avoidance. And so he's a big proponent of healthy conflict and what it can do for a team. So on our team, my business partner and I, uh, we have learned the art of having conflict and how to work through it together. We've built this trust over time. And so we've had to remind our team members, sometimes they've seen us in conflict in a meeting in
Right,
front of them and
right,
had to remind them, hey, y'all should see us behind closed doors. Like it gets even more heated, but the fact is we've used that as fertilizer for the
right,
soil. It has brought us closer and it's
right.
helped us learn to value each other's geniuses and ideas. So,
Exactly. Well,
well,
talking about leadership books real quick, because
yeah,
I'm actually
plug another one.
I'm re-listening to this again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually just recently been updated. Is the book Crucial Conversations
Mm-hmm.
about just, how to have those really difficult conversations. Because again, it's not easy. I mean, whether it's in your work or you're talking to your spouse or you're having a conversation with your children or a father that you haven't talked to in 3 years and you're trying
Hmm.
to repair that relationship. I mean, the opportunity to better your conversation skills
Hmm.
it's so valuable. I mean, there's so many life lessons that can be learned from just being able to sit down and have a crucial conversation with somebody.
That's right. And really what we're talking about, all of these things are continuing to undergird the foundation of trust in a
Absolutely.
relationship, which
Absolutely.
empowers us as a leader and empowers our teams to do so much more. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, Gilmore, I really appreciate you joining me for another episode of the podcast, sharing some of your wisdom with us, your experiences as a man who's led many organizations, been in different leadership roles. And so I really appreciate you shedding light on the topic. And hopefully we'll
Absolutely.
get you back on another episode of the Q Source podcast.
You name it, man. Glad to do it.
All right, Pax, we'll see you this week at the Q Source table.